I just want to start this video by saying that my thoughts are with Ruth Perry's family, friends, and the school community she worked so hard to serve. From sharing the tragic and heartbreaking news this week, I've had a number of messages from people who knew Ruth and worked with her. And she sounded like such an incredible and inspiring leader who will be such a loss to the school community and the teaching community. I've also had messages that worryingly show this is not the first example, but hopefully it will be, well, not hopefully, it needs to be the last. I also want everyone to do me a massive favour and check in on each other, especially our school leaders. I think sometimes we forget how tough, how hard, how isolating and lonely that role can be. And I think we all need to look out for each other better when we're working in such a stressful education system. I will pop the number for the Education Support Partnership charity here, who will always have someone on the end of the phone, and a charity set up to help the well-being of teachers and school staff. Now, someone shared on Twitter a page from the Ofsted report, which interestingly is no longer available on the Ofsted website, but can still be read on the school website. And I'm still now just gobsmacked at it. I've got no words. I think it's clear by most, if not all, people in education is that Ofsted in its current form is not a force for good in education. Whether directly or indirectly, they are up there as one of the main reasons why education is in such a rut at the minute, with the recruitment, retention, workload, well-being issues that plague our profession. I'm not going to sit here and say that every inspector is a bad person. I've met plenty of inspectors, and I know there are so many of them who want to do the best job they can to support and help schools. But I also know there's clearly some charlatans out there where the power's got to their head, and it's the fact that they don't seem to be accountable to anyone, and that creates this level of inconsistency, which consequently then creates the fear that drives so much unnecessary workload. Because we know as teachers in our school, at the minute, in its current form, Ofsted, it's a complete lottery. It's a roll of the dice as to whether you get a fair inspector on the right day, as to whether your school will get a fair judgment. And I'm not saying that all schools are brilliant. I know some aren't, and I know we need a level of accountability. And when it comes to health and safety, when it comes to safeguarding, there needs to be that level of accountability. But you'll never convince me that Ofsted in its current form is the best way of judging schools and holding them to account. It seems to me that Ofsted's agenda at the minute is purely focused on justifying their own existence, because during the pandemic, they were found to do absolutely nothing to support schools and children. And I hope there are going to be discussions at every single level about how we can overhaul Ofsted so that it can be more of a positive force for good in education. I've got a couple of suggestions. Number one, bin the Ofsted grades. We don't need them. We don't need them. There's no reason why a school needs to be defined by a word or two words, because I've seen it. It's a load of tosh. I visit so many schools, and there are some schools I've visited deemed outstanding. You couldn't pay me enough to work in such a toxic environment. Whereas other schools that are deemed by one inspector who didn't like the way they did a certain thing to be requires improvement, that are going above and beyond for the children in their community. At the end of the day, no school's perfect. Every school will have strengths and weaknesses, so a report that just identifies them is surely more than enough. Another thing I'd suggest is making sure that everything Ofsted do is available for us all to see. Every training session an inspector sits through, every documentation that's produced, every feedback meeting that Ofsted have should be recorded and freely available for any school, so we don't get this toxic he said, she said, this inspector, that inspector. We know exactly what to expect and what needs to happen. And so if we feel we've got a rogue inspector, schools can then hold them to account. And lastly, and this is something we can all do as teachers and as schools, is to not play in to the system. So when we do, if we are lucky enough to be on the right side of an inspection, is to not use that grade to get massive banners outside the school and celebrate it, go over and above. And I know it's hard because you want to, but if we keep doing that, we are playing in and giving them the credence they do not deserve. Because we know with a different inspector on a different day, that may well have gone the complete opposite way because it is so inconsistent. And there may well be a school down the road who are doing exactly the same as you, but have had the unlucky roll of the dice and therefore are deemed requires improvement. It doesn't help. There's got to be a better way. In fact, I know there's a better way, and I want to use my platform to campaign for that and encourage as many other people. Just in Ruth's memory, I think we owe it to her and anyone who's ever been affected by such a toxic inspectorate system to make sure nothing like this ever happens again and we create a much more positive experience. That's what we deserve as teachers. That's what our school community deserves. And of course, the pupils in our care.